Okay, let's just go ahead and start. Again, good morning, everyone. Let's see. We'll start the meeting and then any objections to approving the meeting agenda? No, we'll consider that approved. And then we have several action items that I heard conversations about the appointment of the citizen member to the local finance board. And looks like the individual who has been serving has agreed to continue to serve. And just a question, I know we're going to talk about this in a second, but just how is someone notified that that position is available? Do we search for that, or is that just kind of quietly done?
When this was, good morning. When this was, the local finance board was created in 2012, with the assistance of Davenport, we found a local citizen member who was willing to serve on the committee. And that citizen has continued to be willing to serve on that committee. So we've not looked for one. They've been helpful to us along the way. They work for Davenport, but they are not working on the Loudoun Water account. So they do have investment knowledge. So they have helped us in that capacity. So as long as they've been willing to continue to serve, we've continued to ask for their reappointment to this board.
Okay. So go ahead. I kind of jumped in front here. So go ahead with if there's a presentation, or if we just make a motion.
There's a short one for background if you'd want to listen for, especially the new members, if they want to have a little background. So good morning, everyone.
Morning,
this is the appointment of the local member for the board. So we have standards that we have to follow for OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. Loudoun Water began funding this OPEB liability in 2012. And at the time, the board authorized membership in the pooled trust fund. That's the only pooled trust fund in Virginia. So we're required, one of the rules is to have a local finance board, and it's currently composed of Brian, the general manager, the finance director, and a citizen of the Commonwealth. Mr. Joseph Mason is the current citizen and is willing to serve another 2-year term. His resume was also attached in the packet for review. And I have the motion up unless there's any other questions.
Mr. Kelly, if you can hear me, I will be glad to make the motion. And then I think I have a comment afterward.
Sure, Charles, go ahead. Make the motion if you will.
He's good to go. Okay.
Yeah.
I move recommendation to the board to approve the appointment of Joseph D. Mason as the citizen member of the Loudoun Water Local Finance Board to a 2-year term that will expire on November 30th, 2026.
Second. Okay. Tony?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'll raise my hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, Charles, go ahead.
And then, Mr. Kelly, just one more comment about this.
I apologize. I jumped. I didn't mean to approve this before you made your comment. So go ahead and make your comment.
I'm tracking with you. No problem.
I'm trying to follow the rules of order.
The comment that I had is relative to the explanation and the questions that were circulating earlier. For the next appointment, which would be post 2026, if we could look into whether or not you could advertise this vacancy more broadly to those who might want to participate.
Absolutely.
Good
That's
question.
all.
That was kind of where I was going with my first question. You know, how do we appoint somebody? How does this happen, and so forth? So that's a great suggestion. So how do we memorialize that? I guess we'll just
Brian
put
is
that in
writing it
minutes.
down.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we will take
put it
that
in
as an
minutes.
item to move forward for the next time.
We'll put that in the minutes that was recommended. And
Yep.
Any objections, Tony, to that suggestion?
No, sir. Thank you for asking though.
Okay, so we'll consider that for the next time. It says that's in 2 years, right?
Correct.
You said 20. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
All
will
right.
this be on action or consent for the
Consent.
Okay.
Is Joseph, just another question, is Joseph Mason, and he's Davenport, but he is local though. He's Loudoun
Correct.
County?
He is a Lansdowne resident. Yes.
Okay, that's important too. All right, next up is the annual write-off of uncollectible accounts. Sally?
Yes, we are coming to you with our annual request to write off amounts that are over $100 for our policy. So this year we have 120 approximately accounts with balances greater than 100 for which standard collection efforts have been extinguished, which includes collection calls, late notices, reminder notices, and searching the database to see if we can place a lien on the property if they have it in the county. So the attached listing of accounts, I'll scroll down so you can see the amounts. The total of all this is $94,094.45, and this represents 0.08 of approximately 119 million of our total operating charges for 2023. So we'll probably have questions, maybe.
It seems like it's a lot less than last year and the year before that and so forth, so
It
it's
is
nice.
lower than last year. And this big one at the top, we actually deferred from last year, hoping that we would collect on it. We
Okay.
did send a legal letter, but it still has not been collected, unfortunately. So we added it back this year. But yeah, this year is 0.08, last year was 0.09, and then the year before was 0.06. So
Oh, okay.
jumps around a little bit, but still
Remember there was a
pretty
little bit of
small.
a
And the
spike.
majority of those you'll see are in the 200-ish range. So it's really those top 5 up there that are.
Is that big one a commercial account?
It is a commercial account. It's a septic hauler. Yeah, so they were cut off from using our services, but we still haven't collected. So
Sally, it might be worthwhile to take a minute for the new members, kind of our dunning practices and how we try to collect these accounts before they go seriously delinquent,
sure.
if you would.
So I should say thank you. I don't do this, right? So I have a
Right,
great manager,
right.
Denise Guntel, who has been with Loudon Water for 13 years, and she's the one that digs into all these accounts. We also have a collection agent in Finance Paola, and she's the one that would file the liens. And once it becomes a non-active customer, she's the one that would follow up with the customer. So while they're active, if they're residential, and the bill is 30 days late, they get a reminder notice and we can always shut them off. So that's our leverage there. If it moves to an inactive status, which is all of these, it then comes to finance. And finance at that point will try the reminder notices, the late bills, the calls. If they've moved out of the service area, however, or then we do the searches in the database to see if we can find them. If we have the information, we are able to file a Virginia set-off and perhaps collect tax money if they get a tax refund, or the lien on the property if that kind of holds up the property from being sold. Commercial clients, we have a little less leverage, I guess you could say. They might not own property, right? They might be renting the facility. So but our team does not like to write things off. So Denise will still work on these through the end of the year because it could change, right? We could get payments in through the end of the year and she will collect them if she can. So did that help enough, the process?
Question,
Question.
does this get reported to credit reporting agencies?
We do not report to credit reporting agencies. No.
And then I have a question too. Do we turn these over to a third-party collection agency, or are they just gone, these charges?
We do not turn these over to a third-party agency. We've investigated doing that in the past, but the money doesn't work out to do that.
Okay. And the motion is, anyone want to make a motion? I'll make the motion. I move the recommendation to the board to authorize the write-off of the attached uncollectible utility billing accounts with outstanding balances greater than $100 for a total amount of $94,094.45.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This will be consent. Okay. Thank you. Next is Sally, you're still up, is authorizing resolution standby bond purchase agreement.
Okay. Okay, this is our standby bond purchase agreement. So this is related to our variable rate debt. So when we acquired this, it was 25 million in 2005. Our current outstanding balance is about 8 million with our principal payment due in January of 1 million. We got this, as you've heard in our rate presentations, we acquired this to create a hedge against interest rates. And the past 3 years with our variable interest rates, we paid between 0.05 and 4.45. And the current bond rate is 3.79, the AAA municipal bond rate. So that's currently higher than the average we paid. In 2024, we paid 3.45 if I took the average of all the floating interest rates. This agreement is set to expire. It's at 37 basis points and it's due to expire on January 2nd, 2020. Oh, I went the wrong way. On January 2nd, 2025. To cover, we need to have this, which I thought I didn't really have a bullet point on this, but in the event that the bondholders choose to tender their bonds, if we didn't have this, we'd have to immediately pay those bondholders. So we'd have to have that money tied up. So Bank of America has proposed an extension to this pricing of 40 basis points for the next 5 years, which is when these bonds will mature. Davenport reached out to other providers and they were really happy with this quote. They had called us ahead of time and told us to expect, kind of a high rate, but they thought this was very reasonable. It's also important to note that if we did switch, we'd have to basically buy back the bonds, go through the whole process we just went through with issuing new bonds, the official statement, the rating agencies, all that to get the new bonds back. So there would be other fees in addition to just switching. We also have the agreement to terminate with Bank of America if the ratings of the bank are downgraded or if the bonds are redeemed or refunded before we get to, oh, I didn't mean to go forward. Okay, so are there any other questions about?
Have we had people
This renewal.
try to request to redeem the bonds earlier?
No, not with these. They've not attempted to redeem these.
And we've done this for,
We've done this every 3 years. This one is for 5 years because that takes us to maturity. And so if we did a 3-year, we would have to do this again in 2 years and pay the fees that we're paying now to redo all of this. We're paying this year about $30,000 to Bank of America for this. And that rate will the amount we pay will continue to go down as our principal payment decreases.
And
each
even
year.
with this increase in basis points, they're basically staying even when I calculated out what the payments would be. So we'll be paying around 30,000 or less for the next 5 years.
that's great. And as a percentage of our total outstanding bonds, I mean, it's.
We have
25
about 200 million
Yeah,
in
so
outstanding.
this is pretty small.
Yeah. Davenport will continue to evaluate whether at some point we should simply pay this off and move on.
Is it functioning as a hedge when it's such a small amount? I mean, is it still meaningful?
We have paid less interest on this, especially the last couple of years when rates were pretty much zero. It went up a little bit as the Fed increased rates, but now it's going down again. But it is a very small piece at this point, so it just hasn't made sense yet to just get rid of it. Yeah.
Do you think we'll continue to do this in years to come?
I don't know. When we did this, the 25 million kind of approximated our cash position at that point. This is, 25 years ago or 20 years ago, and we've grown a lot. And so I don't know if variable rate would make sense at this point going forward. We've not looked into it since then. So it wouldn't surprise me if going forward, we simply just do regular bond issues and stay away from the variable debt. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Mr. Kelly has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jewel. So make sure I understand. It's liquidity that's available. What I heard was liquidity that's available to pay someone, a bondholder came in early and wanted to cash out. We would have liquidity to do that. am I hearing that correctly?
So the way this works is if you have variable rate debt, anybody who has variable rate debt is required to have a standby bond purchase agreement because
Right.
whoever owns this debt could call it. And Bank of America would be on the hook to pay the principal to the bondholders and then reissue the debt for us. So we would not have to pay all of that principal at once. We're lucky enough that if, it was called, we do have the cash balance, but a lot of places are not. So you're required to have this agreement in place so someone can pay the principal back.
So is it, Brian, is it being, as we pay it down, is that in lockstep with the bonds reducing? Since we're amortizing it down, do we have enough liquidity to, if there's an early call on a bond? So I'm getting, it's a reducing liquidity facility.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm following.
In other words, you have a set amount with Bank of America, an agreement, a certain amount of dollars. And I guess that's pegged to the bonds. So what I'm hearing is the bonds come in early. Somebody comes in early, we have to have that available to us, yet it's reducing. What am I missing?
Bank of America has the liquidity to pay whatever the principal amount remaining is when it's called. So we're paying principal and interest just like any standard debt. The Bank of America is charging us a fee based on our principal amount to maintain their liquidity so that they can buy back the bonds if they're called. We're paying them a fee to do that on our behalf.
So it's kind of like an unused fee, basically, then.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like insurance. We're paying
Yeah.
them to carry this for us so that we don't have to. And again, it's required. We don't have a choice. Variable rate debt requires you to have a standby bond purchase agreement.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I understand now.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, someone want to make a motion? If there are no questions?
I'll make the motion. I move recommendation to the board to approve the resolution that authorizes staff to extend and/or amend the existing bond purchase agreement with Bank of America upon terms and conditions set forth in Bank of America's proposal dated September 26, 2024 for a period of 5 years at a rate of 40.0 basis points.
All in favor?
I didn't.
All in favor?
We didn't catch that, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
I heard a second, so I'm just wondering if we, all in favor? I need a vote.
Aye.
We get everybody's
Sorry,
vote?
consent or action?
It's consent.
Thank you.
I assume, I say aye as well. Yeah, consent. So thank you. Can't see everybody, so. So the next one is the discussion on the operating budget. Sally, you're still up.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, 2025 operating budget is next. We'll talk about the process, the key issues, revenues, then expenses, and expense drivers. So the process, this started back in August. So again, thank yous are in order. All of the cost center owners, we build it from the ground up. So finance isn't doing this in a bubble. So this year too, I have to think, we changed the process a little bit. We use SharePoint, which you hate to monkey with a process that's been in place for so long and has been working, but it worked out great. So thank you to Andrew Lee, who set up the SharePoint site for me. And I didn't really get any questions. All the directors just jumped in and did their sheets and it didn't get messed up, right? I was worried we don't like people touching our spreadsheets. But it worked great. So thank you to all that. So anyway, they submit all their detailed cost center budgets and then it comes to finance to roll up. Thank you to the GMO also, because then Elton and Mark are reviewing it and going back and forth to us, and then it goes to Brian for approval. Personnel also is built from the ground up. So we start with the active employees at budget time. I build up the spreadsheet, right? Salaries, benefits, all that in this huge spreadsheet. So that gets rolled in. So there are lots of support behind here. So today we'll review it. Next month, we'll have the joint finance and CIP committee, and you'll see the 10-year capital improvement plan and the proposed capital spending plan for 2025. And then the full board will be asked to approve it at the December 12th meeting.
So prior to SharePoint, what did you guys do?
Individual spreadsheets. So, and I had them all ready to go because I was like, is this going to work? And Brian will tell you, I went back to him like, what if it gets messed up? So we just broke out individual spreadsheets. So lots of rekeying and combining it, and it worked great. It was proud of us this year. So it made it a lot more efficient, especially with everything else that was going on this year with the system transition and all that.
Right,
It helped.
that's good.
Yeah. Well, and shout out to our IT staff who's like, you'll be fine. You know, there's backup versions. We can help you out. And I'm like, okay. So key issues in this year's budget is that it does include the rate increases that we just went through. So there are the percentages there for all of the categories. And then assuming this will be approved by the board in December. And then growth, we have it set at 2020 ERCs. So of course, we start with the County Fiscal Impact Committee. We back off, we take 80% of that for our service area. And then I reached out to land development and I got the listing of our data centers that are under construction permit and also a forecast of the other housing units that we have under permit. And that came up to a total. And then I added about 130 because this ties to the rate study and it does tie to the fiscal impact total. So it's just a nice little tie. And I think with some expansions, we'll get to, it's 100 connections, so 130 connections. So we'll see. You never know. This is a lot lower than we've had this year and in prior years. Yes, Mr.
Sorry,
Goldie.
do you want questions now or later?
Yes, no, let's do them.
What I thought I would do, which might be helpful for some of the other board members to hear, is as this moves forward from today, just to sit with Brian and you and whatever staff to make sure I understand fully and not have 25 questions per meeting. But when you are talking about growth and relating that back to operating, sometimes there are growth parameters that mean you need more people, that you would have more of or more resource, that you need an operating expense to increase. Is there any method that you have for doing that? When you were talking about seeing the spreadsheets from the departments, does the growth factor in this bottom portion of this slide relate to an increase in resources that would show up in the operating budget that would either be people or expenses? Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but are there specifics underneath that?
I mean, we have new positions, for example. Is that specifically related, to this? We have,
We don't have like a metric that says, for every 2,000 ERCs, you need a new CSR or a new maintenance mechanic or things like that. There are, for the lab example, when you hit different population levels, there's different testing that you have to do. So you might need to add a new lab person for that. But to your question of does growth impact the operations budget, you're absolutely correct. We're expanding the plant. If we're treating more water, if you're treating more wastewater, our chemicals will go up. As our system's expanding into the JLMA, we're going to need more mechanics, more maintenance folks to maintain the lines, things of that nature. But as far as looking at a new connection next year and what that means for hiring next year, we don't have a specific metric.
Okay, and then the reason why I want to be more on point with that individually is we did spend some time earlier on elasticity and sensitivity in ERC. We're going to monitor those trends and see, are those really going to turn out? And then what do they look like even beyond next year? And then it'd also be helpful to do the same type of thing for the, costs that are inducing, the growth induced cost that are showing up in the operating. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
That was a good question. And to that point, I would imagine that there's some kind of a lag in terms of our production's going up. You need to hire more people, you need to expand the plant, but there's a delay of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. I don't know what it is, but just something like this. Do you have a sense for that kind of thing? When we have a busy year and we're producing lots of things, it seems we do our 5-year plan and it seems like there's a tail that kind of is rearward facing.
It is, because again, if all these connections come in December, then we're not going to see an impact, really next year. And, with data centers, we've seen they ramp up production over a number of years. So it really depends on what the connections are and when they occur. So yes, there is a lag for what the impact will be on this next year.
Yeah. Good.
Brian, what's the, this might be too difficult to answer, but kind of what's the staging? If say JLMA, we know that's going to happen. I mean, when do you start hiring people? I'm thinking of government contractors. They get in trouble when they ramp up personnel and anticipate a contract and the contract isn't awarded or there's a delay or something like that. So how do you stage the hiring of personnel to handle the growth?
I say we're very conservative on when we hire. We try not to get out in front too much of it because we don't want to hire someone and then have nothing for them to do. So in my experience here, that's not what we've done. There are also certain positions like inspections that you kind of need to get on board beforehand. As the growth in the JLMA is coming, you need to make sure you have enough inspectors to handle that. Same thing with the growth at the plant. We'll have dedicated inspectors for that. So we know that's coming. We know we can plan for that. But again, the mechanics, the maintenance workers, those are the ones that we can wait and see if it actually happens and then hire and adjust for there.
Okay. Thanks.
Revenues.
I got a
Revenues,
quick question.
Sally, I'm sorry, Mr. Allen has a question.
Can we go back to the ERC slide? Thank you. The 2000 growth projection for 2025 looks really conservative. I just want to make sure that it is really conservative. If you look at this year, we get 2,000 ERCs in May. So we're only looking at 2,000 for the entirety of next year. I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, the real driver of that is data centers. When Micah pulled his data center forecast, I have a list of them. It's 10 million in revenue. That's the construction permits. And on top of that, again, I added 134, not necessarily data centers, but just some cushion. So he's seeing that slow down for next year. Now, will we blow by it? I don't know, right? Because I thought this year's we would hit, but I didn't know that we'd be so far ahead, which I feel looking at the budget helps because I feel like we're getting all these connections this year. We're going to see a lag next year.
I would also just add that one of the reasons we blew by it so early is a couple of the data centers came back and asked for additional capacity, which was not in our forecast because that's not going through our plan review process. So if that happens again next year, we're not tracking that, and we don't know if that would occur.
And then,
but it is based on permits, our construction permits. So there is some data behind this, and we're working on a BI report to be able to share with you at some point when we get it set. That tracks through the land development process. So you can see all the pending connections and then our forecast of when we think they'll hit, but we're not ready yet, but we're working on it.
Sally, one thing that might be helpful to look at, and you guys might have already seen it, but just within the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, the county had, the county released a study by Kimley Horn, which was about transmission corridors mainly, but it also included calculations of the number of existing and proposed data centers based on land development activity. So I think that might be a good benchmark if you guys haven't already seen it. The power implication was that the study was indicating that there was a lot more demand on the electric grid than the PGM forecast of a little bit earlier. And so there's some discussion back and forth whether or not that's really correct. But for the number of data centers, there was a recognition of what the number is now, plus those that are either approved or in the approval process. So I think it might be another benchmark back to what we've been talking about for the ERCs to see if what Terry is asking, are we really, if it's going to be so strong, should it be a higher number in your growth forecast for the whole year, right? Because isn't the 2020 number up there about projecting for a whole year? Then you added some on top of it.
It was lower than that. It was 100 lower than that. So
Okay.
it was around, say,
Okay.
1900. And then I added to have it all tie to all our studies and all our.
Okay. So I guess to Terry's question, we continue to monitor and then how often would you update us? We get our monthly financial summary and that's a good spot for an update.
And then if during the mid-year review, if it's worthy of adjusting at that point, we would adjust up or down, which we did adjust up this year and we still are exceeding. So I like to be right on, of course, but it just isn't always possible yet.
It's a tough thing to forecast.
We reached out to our partners too, and they call it an art too. There's not a science yet that they have. So still work on it. I'm still new. Maybe I'll dial it in one of these
Well, other than
years,
looking
but-
at sort of the pipeline of permits, I don't know, what other things could we look at to forecast?
You could go and evaluate, and this is something that back in the 21, 22 timeframe that the county was sort of grappling with because portions of Eastern Loudoun became a constrained electrical demand area by Dominion. And based on what, Dominion was advising. And so I think you could go and you could do a land use study and say of all the property that is planned in the following categories and zoned in the following categories with the incredible demand for data center development, the likelihood is that X of those categories would turn into data center. And I think that's one more step beyond what has been done recently. But at some point you reach that critical mass without the ability to add lots more square footage. So, and I think we're going to be approaching that soon. So a basic land use study.
I'm sorry, sir, is your microphone?
Isn't that?
Jewel, it wasn't the whole time I was talking. Do you want me to rewind? Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Understood.
So,
But was it just-
so looking at the land use map, that gives us like a macro of what's available potentially, and we know there's a market for it. And so I don't know if that helps with sort of pinpointing, here's the number of ERCs we'll have in a particular year. You might go sometime over the next 5 years, this piece of property is going to develop as data center or something like that. And that's how it's helpful context for sure. But I don't know when we're trying to pinpoint it on a given 12-month period, if there's other indicators we can look at other than just the pipeline of permits. You have to go through the permit process. That takes time in order to be able to pay a tap fee. And
it's not real till it's a permit.
yeah, it's not. It's like, oh, we're going to come in. Okay, well, you got to go through a process.
And then another follow-up to that is I know sometimes when we increase availability charges, you know, if a data center's going to sign up in January, they might push it to December. So it's also possible that we could see stealing some growth from 2025 budget. We might see some people jump in December of this year to try to beat that increase.
Mhm.
That's happened in the past. And then the other thing too is I'm fine, just to circle back to the conservative estimate, I'm fine from a budgetary standpoint having these revenue numbers be conservative. I think that's smart to do it that way. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly and that it was that number was actually what we're contemplating. So I'm fine with the explanation.
Okay. Moving on to revenue. So the total budget is 180.6 million. That's a 2% increase from the adopted budget and a decrease from our projected actual for this year, 6%. So breaking that into our two pieces, operating revenue, which again is 74% of the total, is 133 million. That includes our rate charges for services, fees, and our other charges. And as we just talked about, it anticipates that increase in customer base as well as the rate increase. It's an increase of 8 million or 6% over this year's adopted budget. And then non-operating is where we'll see 47.7 million. This is our availability charges and investment income. So this is 22% of our total, 26% of our total. And so that's going to be a decrease from the adopted budget, and it's split pretty evenly, a decrease in our availability fees, and that's driven by the reduction in ERC connections, and then a 2.4 million decrease in investment income as we are projecting interest rates to decrease next year. Again, it's conservative. You can see I added the detail down there, but I feel good about it because it does tie to the rate study that we just spent a lot of time and effort doing. So.
I have a
there-
couple questions.
Sure.
Is the settlement that we got from Dominion with that cash balance, that unanticipated extra cash make up for the investment income shortfall? Or is that appropriate to not do that in the budgetary process?
Well, we're projecting to use the cash over the next 5 years, and some of it obviously would fall in this year, to pay for our CIP expenses that are coming in the next year. There's no debt borrowing projected for 2025. And so that settlement money that you referenced would simply be used to pay for capital projects this year. So we're projecting to spend down that cash. And so our cash balance, we're projecting to decrease, combined with our projection that rates will decrease on our investments into next year, led us to reduce our projected investment income, interest income for next year.
And then how often rates have moved back up pretty substantially in the past month. How fluid is the budgetary process? I mean, were you looking at, were these rate assumptions, a month ago, or were they in the last couple of weeks? And I know I'm getting into the weeds about, which probably doesn't matter,
they're a month or so ago, I would say. So investment income has been one of those things that has fluctuated pretty well over the last few years. There's been, I think a couple of years ago, we projected 5 million and we got 2 million when rates cratered. So we do our best at the point in time. We actually get a projection from US Bank on what our investment income will be for the next year for the funds invested in US Bank. So that helps us as well. But
and it's a small number. I mean, when you look at the budget, it's not that big, but
yeah,
I was just wondering how you guys came up with that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just a further question. I was had the same question. Is that something you get consensus from Davenport that they agree that rates are going to come down based on US Bank's forecast?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering that too, where you're getting your data for a rate decrease next year. So that's good to know somebody is thinking about it. Okay. I'm good with that.
Moving on to expenses for 2025, we're budgeting 177.5 million. That again is an increase of 10.8 million or 6.5% from this year's budget. The increase in costs, your major categories are going to be in personnel, our wholesale water and wastewater purchases, our system maintenance costs, as well as electricity and depreciation. So we'll break this out also into the two categories. Operating expenses are at 93.2 million. This has our personnel, contractual services, materials, supplies, and other services and charges, and it's an increase of 5.1 million from the 2024 adopted budget. And then I do break it down even more in a slide, 2 slides here. Depreciation is part of that. It's one of our net non-cash expenses, and it is going up 6 million this year, which is larger than we've seen in the past, but that's due to 2 large assets, investments that we've had in Broad Run that we expect to finalize and start depreciation, and then the S/4HANA computer system that we're upgrading to. So those are in the budget and is driving that increase. And then the non-operating expenses, which are our debt payments, principal and interest on our debt payments, are 9.2 million for next year.
Out of curiosity, what do we depreciate the software?
It's 3 years.
It's 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a big, well,
Yeah.
hits, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But we expect to get more than 3 years out of it, right, Mike?
Staff sure hope so. Yeah.
Good.
So again, this is the breakout from the adopted budget in the categories here. So personnel, 2.9 million. That will include all the salaries, health and benefits. We do have new positions factored in there. You might be interested. 12 new positions are factored into the budget. Historically, we wait, right? We don't just January 1 hire everybody. We'll wait and see how the year is going. So we have a little bit of flexibility there. Contractual services, 1.9 million. That's going to be our purchases from Fairfax Water and DC Water, as well as our biosolid disposal. Those are the big categories there. Depreciation, we already talked about. Those other two are little-ish. And then the principal and interest is actually decreasing as our debt is increasing.
Are we still experiencing sort of the COVID dynamic of all these job openings and no takers? Or has that tightened up a little bit?
It's been depending on positions. Just for example, HVAC and electrician have been very hard to fill for the past few years. We've started an apprentice program the last few years with that and with our plant operators, and we've seen that really help getting plant operators in the door, the apprentice program. And then, you know, for our line maintenance folks, for the past few years, we've been really lucky. We've been getting a lot of applicants for those. And then just recently, it's kind of dropped off and we've had trouble hiring for those positions. So I think it depends on the position. Yeah.
How about reviewers or, you know, sort of the white collar side of it?
It's also depended. You know, I think we've hired an accountant pretty easily.
Yeah.
Depending on the kind of engineer you're looking for, I think we've had, you know, more luck with one group better than others. But I think we average about 10 vacancies a month. Our turnover rates, I think for the whole year is about 10% of staff. We have about 355 employees currently.
So we don't have we don't have the same dynamic like planning and zoning has, where they're got however many vacancies, 12, 15 or whatever, and they just can't find people. We're not having that dynamic here.
No. I think we have about 10 vacancies a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And then just to dovetail off that, and I apologize, this is a little bit off topic. Remember we talked about retention and attraction during the GM interview process. I know that was something we talked about a lot. Have we made any strides, or have we contemplated at all a position within the organization that specifically looks at that? And I know, and you don't have to, we could talk about this some other time, but If it's on the top of your head and you have an explanation, that's great. If not, we can talk about it somewhere else.
It's currently not in the budget for this year. It's one of the things we continue to work on and evaluate. And it continues to be on our list, but a specific position we didn't feel was worthy at this time for the next for fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, Mr. Allen, let me add as well, part of what Fred's been doing since he's come on, the first with succession planning, but now what he's really focused on is career paths. And that's one of the things we've heard in our exit interviews is creating a career path so that somebody that comes in entry level, what potential ways they can go up through the organization. We've also seen that as far as our survey as well. So that's one of the things that Fred again is focused on moving forward, which I think will help with that retention as well.
Thanks, Tom.
That was Tom Chunta. Yes, I thought of that one.
Any further questions?
For me.
Any other questions?
Just a reminder that this doesn't go to your November meeting. This will come back in your December board meeting. We'll combine it with the capital spending plan for 2025.
CIP? Okay,
Yes.
that's it. Well, that'll be part of the CIP finance joint meeting in November.
Correct. And
We'll-
just
okay.
for the benefit of the new members, you'll get presented with the 10-year spending or capital improvement plan, but you only approve the 2025 budget.
And there was also a budget document in your packet, and that kind of is more like a book, and there's some fancy charts if you want some more explanation, and yeah, that might help.
12 questions.
That's okay. That's okay. That's what we're here for.
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to make the motion if you're.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Yes, please.
I move the recommendation of the board to approve the 2025 operating budget as presented and forward the budget to the board for approval in December.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Good presentation.
Sorry, just this usually goes on action. Is that preference?
It's going to go in action in December, as I understand the
Yes,
motion. Is that
yes.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
we'll note that in the minutes for the November meeting that it'll come up for action item in December. As you had recommended, Brian. I guess if we want to get technical, we can say we consent to move it to the meeting in December for approval. But yeah, okay, we'll just note it in the minutes. Okay, now we have the monthly report. Quarterly investment review, okay.
Okay. September investment results for review. Our portfolio was at 340 million, and the breakout there, mostly federal government agencies, followed by our liquidity balance, and then US Treasury notes and corporate bonds. There's trends for you, so you can see we've kept the last couple quarters, we've kept the balance around 340 million. The yield's creeping up a little bit, 3.37, and there are some reference rates at the bottom there for you. Maturities during the quarter, we had a lot. We have, oh, Mr. Allen?
Yeah, so the total portfolio does not reflect Dominion, correct?
Correct. The money did not come in until early October.
Okay.
So this
All right.
does not include that yet. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so 49 million matured during the quarter. It was a mix of everything. And then 50.8 million was reinvested into US Treasuries, agencies, and I got some municipals too. And then the LGIP average rate for the quarter is 5.4. And then our strategy at the bottom, we do closely monitor interest rate trends and maturities of our investment purchases so that I try to match the maturities with the reinvestment of the monies we target all approved types of investments that we can for the best return. And then we do want to have enough liquid to meet immediate needs, which currently we are fortunate to not have. Oh, was that it?
Hmm.
Oh. Okay. Any questions on the investment portfolio?
Yeah, I have one up.
You go ahead, Mr.
I'm
Allen.
sorry. Does it make sense? I see you purchased in the quarter 20 million in treasuries with a yield of 3.77. Can you guys put down the maturity of those? Are those, 1 year? Are they 2 year? And does it make sense for us to see that? I'm just curious.
We can certainly add that. That's no problem.
All right.
We'll make that adjustment going forward, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
What's the longest treasuries that we invest in?
We can go out to 5, but
5.
we've been going shorter because the shorter yield has been better. So
If you look in the packet that came with on the last page, it will show you the maturity dates. So the farthest we're currently went out is June of 2028. And the longest treasury, Mr. Allen, is March of 2027. So.
Okay.
Planning to spend that down over the next couple of years.
The thing that stuck out to me, we got 18 million in agencies here with an average yield less than 1. And then looking forward, we're projecting a 4% yield. Why the big delta there?
So the 0.91% are ones that rolled off from investments that we made during COVID when rates were terrible.
Okay.
And now we reinvested that money and where the agency yields are about 4%. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
The same thing, it's like 2 to 3 year money.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Great.
Any other questions? Okay, I think I have one more.
Yeah, I think it's a
Monthly financial summary.
financial summary. Yeah.
Okay, so I wonder if that came. Well, okay, revenues as of September, you can see the other category there. That is, we hadn't gotten the cash yet, but we recognized the money coming in from the easements. So we'll want to back that out, right, when we're looking at totals to try to get a year over year regular amount. So anyway, operating revenues are 142 million as of September, which is above the forecast of 92 million. And all the categories are currently exceeding budgeted amounts, again, with the outlier being that last column. Expenses. Oh yeah, I guess I have. What's the increases down here? There we go. Is that better? Okay. So expenses through September total the 157 million, which is 7.5 million below our forecast. And again, all the categories you can see the forecast is green, so the actuals are below all of our targeted budget amounts, which I like to see. And then the change in net position was 105 million for September. This is our fun chart for ERCs. So you can see as of September, we're at 3,368. Yeah.
And Mr. Yudd, since you're more around that business, than, do you feel like some of the county's policies and other things pulled forward some of this?
Yeah, definitely a rush to file site plans by end of the year, early calendar year 25, when there's a regulatory change anticipated.
So it's reasonable to sort of expect this sort of spike and then for it to go down in future years.
I would agree.
Okay, great.
Okay, and there's our detail at the bottom by category and trends for the last couple of years. So you can see we do jump around, right? So I also, looking at our 2,200 for next year, it's in this ballpark. So we'll see next year. Here's our detail that we added for the percentages of data centers. So we're at currently 43, that's a horrible color to read up there, 43%. And then there's our dollar split out of the 43%, 25 million. Capital spending, as of September, we're at 96% of the total. So that's 79 million out of our reforecast of 82 million. And then of that, I'd like to show you these two. Availability. Where's my breakout? Oh yeah, user rates funded 2.8 million of the capital expenditures, and availability fees funded the remaining 7.4. So that just tells you the projects we're working on are growth related. And that's it for September. Happy to answer questions.
Sally, Chair Allen was asking in the investment summary about the 40 million. It sounded like it was coming in October, but then it looked like it was accounted for in September. My question really is, that actual revenue figure would be 8 million if you weren't counting the 40 million from Dominion. And then I think at one point, Brian, you were advising where that's going to go. Where is that going to go? Just for my recollection.
Yeah, so we do accrual method of accounting. So when we bill, that's when we recognize revenue. So same thing with your user rates, or sorry, your usage charges. It's when it's billed, not when we receive the cash. So that's why there's a difference between the financial summary, which is our accounting revenue. When it's recognized, investment is cash. So not in cash, but in revenue. So it came into us. So we've been investing here and there, the money, working our way down because it was a lot. But we'll use that to pay for capital projects going forward. So the Broad Run expansion, the Milestone Reservoir project, we'll use that extra cash instead of issuing debt. That's just a extra cash that we have to use. Yeah.
And we had a total, which I don't remember what it is, of what we had projected it would save us in interest payment.
Yeah, it was about 60 million.
Yeah, it was significant over
thing.
time.
Yeah.
And
so just big picture, early next spring, we'll come back to you with the new 5-year plan, which will factor in the new rate study, the new budget that's approved, the new extra cash that we have at the end of the year. So we'll have a better picture. But we update the 5-year plan as we go through this ourselves, just to see if there's any big change, and we didn't identify any, but Davenport will assist us going forward in this when we come back to you in the spring.
Great.
And that is it on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Anything else from any of the members like to discuss? Questions?
None from me.
Okay. Tony or Charles, any questions? If not, then we'll have a motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate a good question.
you.
Good
Thank
discussion.
you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Have a good day.